At the peak of a mist-covered mountain, an elderly sage sat cross-legged, his eyes calm as the sky. Before him stood 3 young seekers, each with a question heavy on their hearts. The world is full of questions, all rooted in cause and effect, the sage began. You have each come here seeking answers. Tell me, what troubles you? The first young man sighed. Master, I have been married for years, but my marriage has become a source of suffering. Should I endure it? The second young woman hugged her knees and spoke softly. Master, I have just divorced and feel lost. What should I do next? The third young man stood firm. Master, I have never married and do not wish to. Yet society tells me this is wrong. How should I view my life? The sage smiled. Very well. The questions you ask are the very ones that trouble millions. Marriage, divorce, and being single, all are paths of life. Today, I shall answer your doubts through the wisdom of the I Ching, Laozi, and Confucius. Let us begin the journey of understanding. First question, why marry? The yin-yang balance of the I Ching. The sage turned to the first young man. Why does marriage bring you suffering? The young man forced a smile. Marriage was sweet in the beginning, but over time, conflicts grew. She no longer understands me, and I no longer cherish her. I often wonder, would I be freer if I were single? The sage nodded. All things in the universe exist through the balance of yin and yang. When yin and yang harmonize, there is harmony. When they clash, there is chaos. The I Ching states in the Jiaren family hexagram. When a family has trust and mutual respect, it will be blessed in the end. Marriage is not a constraint. It is the merging of 2 different energies, much like how heaven and earth interact, how the sun and moon coexist. Pointing to the distant mountains, the sage continued, look at the mountain before you. At its base, the river flows, nourishing the land. But if the mountain rejects the water, or if the water refuses to follow the mountain's shape, there will be floods or drought. Marriage is the same. When 2 individuals support each other, their lives flourish. But if they resist and fight, suffering begins. The young man frowned. But what if marriage has become unbearable? The sage replied, when yin and yang oppose each other too strongly, destruction follows. The question is, are you unwilling to adapt, or were you never truly compatible to begin with? The young man fell into deep thought. Second question, why divorce? Laozi's way of natural flow. The sage turned to the young woman. Why did you divorce? She lowered her gaze. I once loved my husband deeply, but over time we grew apart. Our fights became endless. Now that we are divorced, I feel both relieved and lost. Did I betray something sacred? The sage sighed. All things have their seasons. The Tao follows nature. One must not force what is not meant to be. Laozi once said, know the bright but keep to the dark. This is the pattern of the world. In other words, we must understand both joy and sorrow, beginnings and endings. Marriage is like a river. When the current runs dry, forcing it to flow will only lead to destruction. Divorce is not failure, the sage continued. It is an acceptance of change. Look at that dead tree. He pointed to an old tree stump nearby. Though it no longer bears leaves, its roots still nourish the soil, allowing new life to grow. Your past has not been wasted. It has prepared you for what comes next. The young woman's eyes filled with realization. So divorce is not an end, but a transition to a new journey. Third question, can one remain single? Confucius and the ethics of choice. Finally, the sage turned to the third young man. Why have you chosen to remain single? The young man answered without hesitation. I value my freedom. I do not wish to be tied down by marriage. Yet people around me say that not marrying is irresponsible. The sage smiled. Confucius said, a noble person is not limited to one form, but adapts to the times. Responsibility is not confined to marriage alone. A person can be unmarried and still live a life of great purpose. Many believe that responsibility only comes through marriage, but responsibility can be expressed in many ways: caring for parents, contributing to society, living with integrity. Marriage is one path, but not the only path. The young man pondered this for a moment, then nodded with a newfound sense of confidence, as though being single is not avoiding responsibility, but simply choosing a different way to fulfill it. The sage looked at all three of them and spoke solemnly. Marriage, divorce, and being single, each is a choice, and none are inherently right or wrong. Marriage, when harmonious, is like heaven and earth in balance. But when it turns to suffering, it becomes a prison. Divorce, when done with wisdom, is like a river changing course. It allows new life to grow. But if done in anger, it may leave scars. Being single, if lived with purpose, is no less noble than any marriage. But if lived in isolation and selfishness, it leads to emptiness. The universe is built on the balance of yin and yang, and the key to happiness is not in blindly following societal norms, but in finding the harmony that suits your soul. The three young people looked at one another, each seeing a reflection of their own journey in the others. As the sun rose over the mountain, their paths became clear, not because the sage had told them what to do, but because they had finally understood the wisdom of choice.